computer. We are now recording. So, good evening or hello everyone. My name is Kurt Roney and I'm a professor of strategic management here at the University of Mount Olive, right outside Raleigh, North Carolina. And in this program, you are going to have the privilege of witnessing a strategic assessment of the Pfizer Corporation, Pfizer Inc., by a team of MBA candidates who are at the very end of their MBA programs with this in this course and with this assessment. And with that, I'm going to turn over the program to the team leader and coordinator of this program, Mrs. Heather Buckman. Incidentally, just before I do that, let me ask anyone who is not on this team to please turn off their camera so that we're only looking at the presenters. Gabriel, turn off your camera. Thank you. Heather, it's all yours.
Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Buckman, as Professor said, and my teammates are Glenn Roundtree, Michelle Carroll, and Paula Moni. And we are the Pfizer team. We research Pfizer Corporation, so we are going to present about that team.
Would you like to see your PowerPoints now?
Yes, please.
Okay. It should be there. Can you see them?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Who's first? Who's the first to present?
So we have the table of contents. The introduction and background includes the history, mission, and
I'm sorry.
Abel's model and the vision. Environmental assessment is economy, markets, and industry. Capabilities, analysis, goals, strategy, and implementation.
So the introduction and background begins with the history, and there's several events that happened throughout history that changed the course of Pfizer's future. And I won't read all of these, but some of the most important ones are the antibiotic properties that were discovered by Alexander Fleming, and that was for the penicillin mold. And then they used the deep tank fermentation to produce it across the globe, and that was during wartime. In 1971, the Central Research Division established that combined the pharmaceutical, agricultural, and chemical R&D worldwide. In 2002, they acquired Warner Lambert, which was a big step for the growth of Pfizer. In 2009, they acquired Wyeth, and that was when they implemented the two-division structure in biotherapeutics and the pharma therapeutics. In 2015, another acquisition was Hospira, and that was a complementary strategy that added and growing the revenue stream and the opportunity to grow Pfizer's GEP business. In 2019, there's a proposed joint venture with Glaxo to form the new company and manufacture all their over-the-counter medications.
What became of that proposal?
They are in the process to split off and move that outside of their current setup.
So it'll be a joint venture, an entirely new business.
Correct.
Pfizer over the years have had many different types of drugs, but some of the most well-known products of the company have been Lipitor, Linux, Delphican, Zephyromax, Viagra, and Celebrex. These drugs have been very popular for the company over the years. Two drugs in particular next slide, that I wanted to look at was Lipitor and Leonard's. Lipitor, which became one of the company's best-selling drugs, and also became one of the best-selling prescription drugs of all time. Leonard's is currently the company's second best-selling drug. Here we have pictures of their best-selling, well-known products that you may have seen on commercials, or you may have heard about even at your local doctors in the area. Pfizer's priority is researching and developing products and treatments that would benefit their patients around the world. In order to do that, they have what is called a product pipeline, which has been a vital part to Pfizer. Currently, we'll find there are over 100 individual products that are located in the Pfizer product pipeline. And these pipelines are individual products and individual products which Pfizer has put resource and time into. The success of these products are very important for the company, as many of the best-selling drugs are already gone off patent, or they will be going off patent very soon.
An interesting comment is that out of 100 in development, right now only 11 are actually in registration for commercial sale. So that's 11%, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
They develop a lot more that they end up selling.
Yes, sir. These are key programs which are located in phase 2. And we will see that we have the medicine and diseases. Now, each of the medicines is lined up with the respective disease that it is able to cure or able to deal with. Now, each respective disease that the medicine is lined up with, they are able to do more than just that one disease. But all these medicines, these are the highlight diseases that they deal with. Here we'll find what we call biosimilar programs. A biosimilar program is a product that is identical to the original product that has been manufactured by a different company. Now, usually this happens when a product is about to go off patent. And here we have 3 in particular. We have Humana, which is produced by Abbott Laboratories, which is able to treat autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis. We have Avastin, which is produced by Genentech, which is a cancer medicine that interferes with the growth and spread of cancer cells. And an example of that is ovarian cancer. Then we have Rituxan, which is produced by Genentech again, which also is a cancer drug that interferes with growth and the spread of cancer cells. An example of that is leukemia. Here we have what we call cancer treatment products, which are located in the registration phase or phase 3. Now, here we have, again, the medicine and the disease that it was able to focus on. Now, we will notice later in our presentation, we will see how cancer or oncology will play a large part in the long-term success of Pfizer. 2 in particular, the Telazaril, which focus on ovarian cancer, and Telazab, which focuses on hepatology, are currently 2 of them medicines that are currently in the registration stage.
Were you referring to hemophilia by any chance?
Hemophilia.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
Pfizer's mission is to be the global leading innovative provider of pharmaceutical drugs to improve the lives of individuals living with health challenges that can be addressed by pharmaceuticals. Here is Abel's model, which shows Pfizer, their consumer groups, which consist of medical centers, physicians, the government, Medicare and Medicaid, the unmet needs of the consumers, which is internal medicine, immunology, oncology, rare diseases, and distinctive competencies, research and development in genetics, oncology, immunology, vaccines, cardiology, and government relations. These distinctive competencies are what Pfizer does that is better than their competitors.
Yeah, Professor Abel over in the UK wrote a book that told us that if we can answer these three questions, we can pretty well capture the concept of the corporation and define its mission. And that's why I ask our MBA students to become familiar with this model, because it becomes a way to describe a corporation's essential nature in a very short phrase, or very short terminology.
And to expand on the consumer needs being addressed by Pfizer, they're currently looking in cardiovascular diseases, oncology, Alzheimer's, rare diseases, and vaccinations. Several years back, they had stopped the Alzheimer's research, but there's been a report released within the last few days that Pfizer and several other groups are reinventing that process and expanding back into the Alzheimer's research.
It is Pfizer's vision to make the lives of individuals happier and healthier worldwide. This vision shows Pfizer's desire and for their future state and where they want to end up in the big picture. It also states their desired outcomes. Next. Pfizer now manufactures over-the-counter consumer products, prescription medication. They create and provide pharmaceuticals for cancers and rare diseases, and they have research and development for immunology. In 2023, the future, Pfizer becomes a worldwide leader in pharmacology drugs. They increase funds for research and development in order to concentrate on gene therapy, immunology, oncology, rare diseases, and vaccines. They complete their joint venture with Pfizer, with Glaxo, and no longer produce consumer products. Once they complete the joint venture, they discontinue production of consumer products to focus on increasing research and development of medications to cure cancer.
Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now we are going to take you into the economics section of environmental assessment. Here we see a graph showing the 2018 sales in millions of US dollars by region for Pfizer. This shows that the United States is almost half of Pfizer's sales. So that's pretty impressive. Because of these segments, we are going to be looking at the United States, Europe, which falls into the developed Europe category, Japan, which falls into the developed rest of the world category, and Nigeria and China, which fall into the emerging markets category. Here is a graph that shows the GDP PPP for the big countries. So that's gross domestic product, purchasing power parity. And the big countries that we're taking a look at are China, the United States, and European Union. As you can see, China has the most growth, so they're healthy. And then prior to that, the European Union had the most growth.
It's rather interesting that China surpasses the United States in 2013. And the European Union, which consists of 28 countries, 1 year later, and that the gap between China and the US and the European Union gets wider in every year, which tells us that that's probably where a very large and growing market exists.
Yes, and here we have a graph that's showing the GDP PPP for small countries, which is the Asian 5, which is Southeast Asian countries, Sub-Saharan Africa, and India. So this shows that India has substantially increased to have the most growth, and then prior to that was the Asian 5 plus India. Here we have a graph showing the GDP PPP per capita for big countries. So here it shows that US is the wealthiest country, so they can afford pharmaceuticals, and they consume the most goods per population, so they consume the pharmaceuticals that they can afford. And if also what this shows is if you want to do business with China, we have to use the low-cost strategy because China is a large population, a large country, and it's not in a high-price market. Here we have a graph showing the GDP per capita for smaller countries. And as you can see, the y-axis has much lower numbers than the big countries, so they're not as developed as the big countries. And this shows wonderful growth trends, and you would use the low-cost strategy here as well because they're not as developed and they're not in a high-price market as well. And you would introduce new and higher-priced drugs as time goes on and the countries continue to grow. And then the Asian 5 is the wealthiest country and consumes the most goods per population.
I think it's great that Heather reminded us that countries with low GDP per capita are targets for low-cost competition, whereas the wealthier countries are targets for more differentiated, patented products. Just for the benefit of the audience out there, I think we usually pronounce that as ASEAN. That's just the way we pronounce it rather than Asian, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. No big deal.
Okay, I'll try to get that. Thank you. This shows health expenditures that have steadily increased in the United States. So as we can see, they are a necessity. And the gray bars represent the recession. So the recession did not affect that. It was still a necessity that the population needed. So here we have a conclusion slide to wrap up what I mentioned in the previous slides. So the United States makes up almost half of Pfizer's revenue at 47.21%. The United States is the wealthiest country. It consumes the most goods per population, and health expenditures have steadily increased in the United States. For the bigger countries, China has the most growth. China has the greatest dollar value of all goods produced. And for the smaller countries, all the countries have wonderful growth trends with the low-cost strategy being used. India has the most growth, and ASEAN 5 is the wealthiest, and ASEAN 5 consumes the most goods per population.
ASEAN.
Oh, ASEAN.
ASEAN. Sounds like ocean.
ASEAN. Okay.
Sounds like a little bit like ocean. ASEAN.
ASEAN. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So
I should tell the audience out there that Heather is a brilliant student, does wonderful work, and it's almost delightful that I have an opportunity finally to correct her on something. So.
I'm not the best with pronunciations, as I needed the last names earlier. Okay, so now we're going to take us into the economics exchange rates section. So here we see the graphs from top to bottom, left to right is U.S., Europe, China, U.S., Nigeria, U.S., and then Japan, U.S. So here we have a summary of the graphs that were just shown. So the U.S. dollar is becoming stronger versus Europe's euro. Euro buys fewer dollars. The China yuan is becoming stronger. A U.S. dollar buys fewer yen. Yen, can you pronounce?
Yuan.
Yuan. See, I'm not the greatest at this, so I apologize. Yuan. Prior to 1985, the Nigerian dollar was not worth anything to the U.S. dollar. Since 1985, it has weakened significantly to become worth fewer U.S. dollars. Japan won, becoming slightly. Yes.
It's the Japanese yen, the
yen,
Chinese
okay.
Yuan.
Yuan, okay.
It's very confusing.
Yep, okay. So Japan yen is becoming slightly stronger. A U.S. dollar buys fewer yen. And in the history we have, it was difficult to bring profit back to the United States in all regions. Today, it's easier to convert foreign currency to the U.S. dollar. However, if the dollar is strengthening, we want to see if profit will continue to increase. So here from left to right, we have the real disposable personal income and real disposable personal income per capita. So this is showing that it is the real disposable personal income has steadily increased since 1960, which shows us that households have more money to spend and save. So the population can afford more pharmaceuticals.
And this is just for the United States, right?
Yes.
The FRED, again, for the audience, refers to the Federal Reserve Economic Database. And so this is just U.S. information, but it's still relevant to Pfizer because half of Pfizer's business is in the U.S.
Yep, so here we have a graph showing the producer price by industry for pharmaceutical and medicine manufacturing in the United States. Manufacturers are under a lot of pressure For example, the drugs that are losing patent protection, and so Lipitor, Viagra, that has given them pressure. Manufacturers' prices are charged to retailers, and these have steadily increased. Since 2010, there's been a steep increase with new drugs with patents. In the United States, we have pharmacy benefit managers, which they raise drug prices by not choosing the lowest cost drugs and not passing through rebates to retailers. So how they work, and I'm going to call them PBMs for short, is they started with the idea that they would reduce healthcare costs and pass the savings on to consumers. They would use their buying power to lower total costs of pharmaceuticals. But recently, they're charging much more for generic drugs than they are paying pharmacies. And they supply the drug with the highest rebate. So rebates increase list prices. So when signing a contract, the company doesn't know which drugs they will need. Therefore, the rebates are distorting incentives. Here we have a graph showing producer price index by industry. This is for the pharmacies and drugstores, which retailing of prescription drugs in the United States is what we're looking at. This shows that retailers' profit margins on generic drugs are higher than on patented drugs. And there's large portions of manufacturers' cost reductions to retailers that are not passed through to consumers. And as this graph shows, since 2010, there's been a flattening pattern in the United States drug prices. This is due to regulatory and political pressures and larger portions of drugs losing patent protection again.
Yeah, since 2010, prices really haven't increased that much on average at the retail level. And as Heather points out, we're all familiar with what's going on just by watching the news. This is a sort of a political football, and it's also the result of what Heather described with the intermediaries involved, particularly the PBMs.
Yep, so here we have a conclusion slide that shows the U.S. households have more money to spend and save. Income levels have been steadily increasing. The population can afford more pharmaceuticals. And manufacturers' prices are charged to retailers. They have steadily been increasing as well. And I mentioned these points again, so I won't read them for you since I already mentioned them, but you can take a look. And there has been a flattening pattern in the United States drug prices, again, due to the reasons I mentioned, that you can take a look as well. Here we have Porter's Diamond, and this model is used to assess the support that is provided to an industry by the economy of a specified country or geographic region. The model also indicates an industry's growth potential in a specified country or region. So there's 4 sections: factor conditions, local demand conditions, firm strategy, structure, and rivalry, and related and supporting industries. So for the first one, factor conditions, this will consist of a nation's position in factors of production, such as skilled labor or the infrastructure necessary to compete in a given industry. And then we have the related and supporting industries, the presence or absence in a nation of supplier industries and related industries that are internationally competitive. And then we have firm strategy, structure, and rivalry, and this is the conditions in the nations governing how companies are created, organized, managed, and the nature of domestic rivalry. And then we have local demand conditions, which is the nature of home demand for an industry's products or services. And this is relevant because the next slide is where I will rate for the Porter's Diamond for the countries that fall into what we are analyzing here for Pfizer.
Okay, and just a brief instructional moment for everyone in the class, as well as anybody out there in cyberspace. If you were a manager in a pharmaceutical or any other company, any other industry, you'd certainly like to try to assess the different countries that you might do business in, or for that matter, that you are doing business in, to try to assess which of those countries is most attractive, is most likely to be supportive of your industry. And that support is going to come from that particular country's economy. And so Michael Porter, a famous strategist, economist, devised this model to enable us, we managers, to assess the extent to which a country's economy supports an industry. And so here we go. Heather, your microphone is on.
Sorry. Here we have Porter's Diamond, where we assessed it for the US, Europe, China, and Nigeria. Then you can see the ratings that we gave under each category that was recently mentioned with the total, as well as the average. And here we can see that the United States is the country with the greatest support to the pharmaceutical industry based on the ratings, in which I will explain on the next slide a little further detail as to why.
Okay. And just for the record, this is a hypothetical analysis. We don't ask this team to really know what the factor conditions in China or Nigeria are. This is an exercise that demonstrates how the analysis is done.
Okay, so United States was rated #1 because consumers purchase most of Pfizer's products. They're the wealthiest country, therefore the population can consume more goods and buy them at expensive prices. And they have a good dollar value of all goods produced during each year and good growth. So we have Europe is #2, and they contribute to Pfizer's sales. They consume a lot of goods, and they have a good dollar value of all goods produced during each year and good growth. And then we have China as #3 because they do not contribute much to Pfizer's sales, and China has the greatest dollar value of all goods produced during each year. They have the most growth, and goods must be sold using a low-cost strategy, and they do not consume a lot of goods because they cannot afford drug prices. And then Nigeria was the #4 because they do not consume many goods because they cannot afford drug prices, and they do not contribute much to Pfizer's sales, and they do not have a good dollar value of all goods produced during each year, and they do not have a good growth.
Okay, now we'll move into the environmental assessment and move through the markets. So this slide shows the countries that have universal health care of some sort and those that do not have it at all. And this mainly represents the access to even having health care in general to be able to purchase the drugs that Pfizer has in their product line. The world population by age group. This slide on the left of the line in the middle shows that where we're at historically up to today with the population spread of age group. As of today, we have 26% in the category from ages 0 to 14, 15% is from 15 to 24, and 50% is in the 25 to 64 age group, and only 9% is 65 and above. As you can see, from now to the year 2050 is expected that the elderly population is going to double and the others remain fairly flat. So it's important for Pfizer to focus on the consumer demands of the aging population, as well as the youngest population that would be consuming the majority of their products. And again, this slide just highlights what I was saying as far as the population of the elderly and the child and across the countries. As you can see, Europe has the highest population of the elderly population, as well as the minor population. Africa has a very limited minor population, and that's because of the low birth survival rate, and their older population is astronomical as well. But again, with their low birth rates, that drops the pediatric population. And just
I might add, just as a personal note, this is a very dramatic slide. As Michelle, and I promise not to interrupt, so I'm violating my own rule here. Consider me guilty of a terrible sin.
No worries.
But when we look at Africa, Michelle explained the reason that the overpopulation or the over 65 population is so small is, of course, the high mortality rate. Folks in Africa generally, and this is a very unfair thing to say because countries do differ, but we see that the proportion of the population, the seniors, is really very low because of how difficult it is for the multitude to survive.
And so this slide just shows the conditions, medical concerns for each of those distinct populations. The minority population, or minor population rather, is most focused on immunizations, all of those vaccines that babies get, and then the colds and infections and things like that that they get as they go through school. And then once they get into the elderly population, then we have arthritis, Alzheimer's and dementia, cardiovascular disease, cancer, HIV, obesity, cholesterol, and those rare diseases as well. And this slide shows the prevalence of the medical conditions that Pfizer currently has, both over-the-counter and prescriptions that treat these conditions. Again, it's chronic pain, diabetes, hypertension, and arthrosis that we have products for. And this slide, though it shows a lot of others, it's interesting to me to see the rates of hypertension amongst the male population. And many of these are comorbidities of obesity as well. So it's important that Pfizer continues their pipeline for research in that area.
I think it's really because you women make us so nervous.
So again, the obesity prevalence, it exacerbates all other medical conditions and leads to further complications and increase the number of other medical conditions that you may have as well. And that prevalence has increased steadily over the last 5 years and is projected to continue to do so. So it's very important that Pfizer reaches out and continues their product line in that department. And they do have some medications in the product pipeline in the early phases for that as well.
Sure. I hope it's clear to everybody that what Michelle is doing is showing us what the drivers of demand for drugs produced by Pfizer and others, what those drivers are. And this one is dramatic. Just like when we looked at that global chart earlier regarding life expectancy, you can see that back on that chart, Pfizer and its industry was being asked to deal with problems that have to do with just survivability, basic health. Whereas once you get into the more developed nations, we're talking about, sort of having it too good. We're overweight. Why is that? Not too much.
And this goes to show the diabetes prevalence across the globe as well. The Western Pacific has a far higher prevalence than the rest of the countries. I was surprised when I was doing the research that North America fell as low as they did on the chart, just because you hear about it all the time. But we are right in the middle of the pack.
Wow.
And Alzheimer's disease is another condition that's projected to triple over the next 30 years from where we are today. And that's, again, a product that they had tabled, and now that they're doing research to get that back in their R&D pipeline as well. The leading causes of death in the United States are heart disease and cancers, and as Glenn had mentioned earlier, they are two of the focuses of Pfizer. And so these products are very important to their future as well. And vaccination, going back to the child population here in the United States, you can see that with our life expectancy as compared to that of Africa, the vaccinations are a contributor to a longer lifespan. And that, again, shows that correlation. The U.S. has recently seen an increase in the number of measles cases for the children who have not been immunized. And I'm sure we'll continue to see that as parents are declining to get vaccinations for their children. And some of the potential demand limitations are the side effects of medications, the cost of medications, and the access to health care. And this chart shows the percent of adults who report delaying and are going without Medicare or medical care due to the cost. So as Heather had mentioned earlier, though we have more money to spend after taxes and whatnot, the cost of everything in general is going up. So prescriptions, their prices are increasing as well. So it makes it difficult for some of the population to get those medications, and that could lead to an exacerbation of those conditions or lead to further complications. And this is a chart who shows the access to care impacts. As you can see, United States is very low on the chart, with the ability for patients to call and get an appointment the same day or the next day, which again can lead to the exacerbation of medical problems. And the side effects, chart just shows back in the day, the prescriptions, people were given a prescription, they took it, didn't matter what the side effects were. Now that medications have been developed, a lot of the times the side effects can be equal to or far worse than what the condition was they had to begin with. So a lot of patients are getting involved in their own health care and doing research and making decisions as to whether or not the risk outweighs the benefit of the medication. So the conclusion to the market analysis is the world population is increasing in age, and therefore the needs for advanced medications and vaccines continues to grow. The incidence of cardiovascular disease and obesity are also increasing, therefore increasing the demand for Pfizer's drugs. Pfizer has products that prevent or treat many of the disease pathologies, as well as the products to alleviate the symptoms such as pain and other ailments that go along with those conditions. Underdeveloped countries where access to health care is difficult due to the affordability or availability are markets where Pfizer has programs that can provide assistance to the patients. Pfizer offers those programs to get medications to those in need, either at the lowest cost possible, and they also participate with the NGOs to provide them for free where applicable.
Time for industry analysis.
Yes, now we'll move on to the industry analysis. And we have a BCG matrix. The BCG matrix shows products and product categories in the pharmaceutical industry produced by Pfizer and where they are in terms of market growth and market share. We'll start with the biosimilars, which are ventures. Glenn previously talked about, I'm going to say Tanzimob. It's very difficult to pronounce.
Tanezumab, but
yeah, that's it, right?
However you pronounce it, it's okay, because nobody can pronounce that name. Incidentally, we should acknowledge that these are really the ventures, right?
Correct. Those are ventures.
And so they don't have to be biosimilars necessarily. These are simply the new drugs in the pipeline of all the, because this is industry, an industry analysis. These are the products in the pipeline of all the companies in the industry. Tanezumab is an example.
Correct. And that product is actually just past a clinical trial, and they announced on April the 18th of this year that they had good results from the testing that they did, and it is in registration right now, in phase 3 registration, and it could be that it may move over to STARS soon if everything goes well. But it did show good results on those who have osteoarthritis. Of course, then we have STARS, which are patented products, which includes oncology, cardiology, and immunology. STARS are those products that Pfizer have currently, and they are patented. And then, of course, we have...
I'm sorry.
Of course, we have the cash cows, which are generic products. Those include Teva, which is manufactured by...
Teva.
Teva is a form of Viagra, and it's manufactured by Greenstone.
Teva is a company in Israel that is recognized to be probably the largest producer of generic drugs. And so that's why it was named here. But every one of these circles is probably represents a generic drug. Teva just is here to demonstrate that it's this is the category of drugs that we're talking about.
Correct. And of course we have Lipitor, which is no longer a patent drug, but it still has a lot of sales, so it's slowly moving over to the dog section. Lipitor,
remember we were told earlier, is probably the largest drug in terms of sales that has ever been produced. It's a Pfizer product, but it has gone off patent. And when, of course, that happened, Pfizer sales really dropped. But it's still used quite a lot because it's a very popular drug. So it's a cash cow, and it's sort of nudging its way over to where it's going to be a dog someday, but it's probably not there yet.
Next slide.
Okay, we're done with the.
Yeah, there's a summary for
I'm
it.
glad you didn't get into much detail on the dogs.
No, there's another slide.
We old guys have our pride. I'm trying to advance it. I'm sorry.
Okay, so as we said, stars are high market growth and high market share. Their products include patented medicines, cardiology, oncology, immunology. Of course, cash cows are slow market growth, high market share, mostly generic products. They turn their profits into cash to invest in research and development for the pipeline. Low market ventures are low market shares, fast market growth potential. Those products are in the pipeline and may or may not make it to stars or may just move straight to dogs. And dogs are low market share, slow market growth. These are products which were once cash cows or failed ventures, and their patents expired, and generic products are produced by other companies as substitutes.
Okay, now we are going to take a look at comparing Pfizer with its competitors. Here we have graphs that are comparing Pfizer with its competitors in regards to sales, operating profit margin, return on investment, and return on equity for 2018. The arrows indicate where Pfizer stands within the industry, and we will discuss this within the next couple of slides. We have a little bit of a summary that will discuss this in further detail. Here we have graphs that are also comparing Pfizer to its competitors in long-term debt, equity, invested capital, and the leverage ratio, which we will discuss in the next slide in further detail. So with these graphs, we can indicate that Pfizer has the highest sales with Novartis AG close behind. Pfizer has the highest operating profit margin with Allergan PLC close behind. Eli Lilly has the highest return on investment with Bristol Myers Squibb and Merck & Company close behind. And Pfizer has the 5th highest return on investment, so they're not superior in that category. Eli Lilly has the highest return on equity with Bristol Myers Squibb and Merck & Company close behind. Pfizer has the highest long-term debt with GlaxoSmithKline close behind. And Bristol Myers Squibb has the lowest long-term debt. Allergan PLC has the highest equity with Novartis AG, Pfizer, and Sanofi ADR close behind. Pfizer has the highest invested capital with Allergan PLC, Novartis AG, and Sanofi close behind. And GlaxoSmithKline has the highest leverage with no other companies close behind. Pfizer has the 7th highest leverage ratio, and all companies above 30% have a comfortable leverage within this industry. So those are all those companies in the previous slides on the graphs, except for Allergan PLC, Bristol Myers Squibb, Novartis AG, and Sanofi ADR.
I'm not sure that above 30%, but companies in the neighborhood of, I wonder if we could just change this to companies with about 30% leverage, a comfortable leverage. So, you know, it's kind of like Goldilocks. So we want to be able to take advantage of low-cost borrowed capital as long as our rate of return on investment is higher than the cost of capital, and Pfizer's is. On the other hand, if our leverage were as high as Glaxo's, which is astronomical here, then you know, that's pretty risky, and that's not a good place to be taking advantage of any more borrowed capital. They've already got more than they need, right? So, but as a general proposition, if we just look at how Pfizer stands in comparison to its rivals, what would we say? That Pfizer is in good shape. It's in comfortable financial position, in some cases, you know, relatively strong. For instance, with its profit margin, its high sales, it's got this nice, comfortable leverage ratio. So I think we could probably conclude that financially, Pfizer is able to stand toe-to-toe against any of its rivals from a financial perspective.
Here we have Porter's 5 forces for Pfizer. The 5 forces are threats of new entrants, which is low, bargaining power of buyers, which is low to moderate, bargaining power of suppliers, low to moderate, threat of substitutes, moderate, and competitive rivalry, moderate to high. Porter's 5 forces is used to assess an industry's profit potential, and each force drives down profitability. Here we have a Porter's 5 forces scorecard on the industry showing the different countries that Pfizer is in and the competition for those. You can see that in the United States, the average is 3.0, Europe's 2.6, China 2.4, and India, of course, is 2.0.
What's your conclusion? Where is the profit potential the highest and the lowest? If these 5 forces suppress profitability, right?
Correct.
These are forces that push profit down. And so where are the forces that push profit down the highest? In the US?
No.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So.
Competitive rivalries.
Okay, and where are they the lowest?
The lowest, they are in China and India.
Yeah, and so supposedly there's plenty of room for profit potential in those 2 developing nations. And yet I think we're going to see that even though the potential is there, getting into there and competing is another issue. Once you're there, you can make a profit, but and the potential is good, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to realize that potential. But nevertheless, here we have an assessment of these 4 countries' profit potentials in the pharmaceutical industry.
So the conclusions for competitive rivalry is the most intense. The competitive rivalry is most intense in developed nations, less intense in developing nations, and it's moderated by government controls in India and China. Competitive rivalry is the strongest and most basic of the 5 forces. Threat of new entrants is lowest in developed nations where there already are numerous incumbents. Highest in developing nations where the industry is not yet mature. Entry barriers in developing nations include intensive government control.
Right.
Next. The bargaining powers regulation of drug companies' marketing options in the U.S., while substantial, are not as intensive in the countries where universal health care exists, such as Europe. Bargaining power of suppliers is low. Chemicals and equipment used for manufacturing drugs are widely available. The supply and demand balance favors and industry manufacturers in India. The high rates of conventional drugs for threats of substitutes, patent expirations increase the number of substitutes for existing products. Producers of new drugs must maintain full pipelines. The substitute supplies to alternative industries. So here we refer to genetic engineering development of biological drugs that are, sorry, I can't read that slide, that are made from organic molecules, not conventional medical chemicals.
Right.
Industry life cycle. The industry life cycle.
Oh, okay.
The pharmaceutical industry is in the mature stage. The traits of the industry are competitive, profitable, dependent on technology for growth, research and development, costs increasing, and the challenges of the industry are amount of time and resources invested, work to get patents extended, and deterring competitors. The traits are in the embryonic stage, that is when they're attempting to build a product. It could be into those that are coming off the pipeline and are starting to grow. In the growth, it's attempt to sustain growth. Biosimilars are on the pipeline. It could become leaders. Of course, the shakeout is where those weak products or products that are not strong and they may have issues are going to fall out of the market. Mature products hold and maximize profits. This is where survivors take their place in the decline. It's like Lipitor. It's come off patent. The patent's expired. Substitutes are coming in. It's still being sold at a high volume, but it's not as high as it was at one point.
Now we are going to head into the capabilities section. And we're going to first look at financial trends. These graphs here show the sales in millions of dollars, the operating profit margin and percentage, return on investment and return on equity in percentage as well for Pfizer during 2008 and to 2018. And the arrows explain the reason for the increase and decrease, which we will further explain in a couple more slides.
Perhaps you could just talk a little bit about some of the arrows, Heather. Some of them are just so dramatically important. By way of example, Wyeth and loss of the Lipitor patents.
Yep, so in 2009, the Pfizer acquired Wyeth, and they had new products and things like that, which increased their sales, as well as the profit and return on investment. And it also increased their return on equity as well. For the Lipitor patents, those lapsed, so those decreased sales as well as operating profit margin. And then the exchange rates decreased the sales due to them being weakening versus strengthening during that time. And then Hospira is where they acquired Hospira as well, so that increased their sales for new products and research and development.
Yeah, these are quite dramatic. You can see that back in 2009, Pfizer's sales were $50 billion. And by 2010, they were somewhere around 67 billion. That, you know, from 50 to 67, that's an increase of 34%, over a third, an increase of 17 billion on 50. So that was a whale of an increase. And we can see that due to the, and I'm sure Heather's going to talk about this, the break-even effect, that those sales were covering fixed costs at a much higher rate, and the result was this dramatic increase in operating profit margins. And then Lipitor patent expired, and boy, look what happened to the sales again. It went right back down, and of course the effect of declining sales on profit margins was equally, if not more, dramatic. So the takeaway that one gets from a chart like this is that this industry is highly volume sensitive. It's not entirely volume sensitive because profit margins are so important, but we can sure see what the impact of volume changes can be.
So here we have graphs showing the long-term debt in millions and the equity in millions as well. And these also have where the Wyeth acquisition increased the long-term debt, and then the Wyeth stock issue increased their equity as well. So it was parallel with each other. So that means that they are utilizing their debt with equity and paying it off.
Okay.
Okay, so here we have the sales trends. So in 2009, which was mentioned, they acquired Wyeth. Peak sales in 2010 were $67.8 billion. They delivered $58.5 billion in sales. That was up 29% over 2009. This growth was largely driven by the addition of Wyeth's products. Pfizer acquired King Pharmaceuticals for $3.6 billion in cash, so that contributed some amount. And then 2011 to 2016, Lipitor patent lapsed. Lipitor's sales contribution fell considerably from $9.57 billion in 2011 to $3.94 billion in 2012. In 2012, revenues were $59 billion, a decrease of 10% compared with the $65.3 billion in the year of 2011. In 2014, they acquired Innopharma for $225 million. This acquired up to $135 million in milestone payments in a deal that expanded Pfizer's range of generic and injectable drugs.
Yes.
Okay. In 2015, we have $48.8 billion, which was $19 billion lower. $3.2 billion in losses of exclusivity. Acquired Hospira Incorporation for $15.2 billion, and they acquired a controlling interest in Redvax for an undisclosed sum. This deal expanded the company's vaccine portfolio, targeting human cytomglavo. No, I know this is not my strength.
We don't care.
Okay, this long C word restarted its collaboration with Eli Lilly surrounding the phase 3 trial of tanezumab. Pfizer received an upfront sum of $200 million, acquired 2 meningitis drugs from GlaxoSmithKline, Nimenrix and Mensivix, for around $130 million, expanding the company's meningococcal disease portfolio of drugs. In 2016, $52.8 billion, that's $4 billion higher, overcoming more than $23 billion in brand patent expiries between the years of 2011 and 2016. Addition of new products including Excresa and Extandia, Anacor Pharmaceuticals Incorporation, Bamboo Therapeutics, and Medivadian Incorporation acquisitions, and acquisition of AstraZeneca's small molecule anti-infectives portfolio, primarily outside of the U.S. So for the operating profit margin, there was a high in 2013 at 53.1%. There was a low in 2016 at 44.6%. And then the break-even effect, the professor mentioned, is that the sales and operating profit margin run parallel with each other. And the high volume is where there are high sales and profits and where the variable costs increase, but the fixed costs and expenses don't increase much. This is due to the Wyeth acquisition, which produced a large increase in volume. And the low volume is where the low sales and profits happen, where the variable costs decrease and the fixed costs remain the same. This example was the Lipitor patent expired, which revenues decreased due to generics and price decreases. And the profits substantially decreased sharply because fixed costs and expenses didn't change much. And here we have the break-even effect, which refers to the revenues necessary to cover a company's total amount of fixed and variable costs during a period of time, which goes with the explanation in the above slide.
Yeah. And so when the Lipitor patent was lapsed and the sales went down, both in volume but also price. So the revenue dollars dropped for 2 reasons. One, the drug was substituted by other drugs which were generics, but also the price on the Lipitor that Pfizer did sell went down, and so the revenues really came down this way. And of course, when they did, the sales came down, and as they came down, this gap between the total cost, that is fixed and variable, really narrowed quite a bit. And that's because the fixed costs and expenses that don't go up or down with volume did not go up or down very much anyway. So as the sales came down, the profit margin really got squeezed. This is the break-even effect.
Now, the rates of return on investment and equity, the impact of leverage, capital costs is return on invested capital. And then it also is parallel with profitability, so it's the same pattern in the charts. For each Wyeth share, Pfizer paid $33 in cash and 0.985 share in Pfizer stock. In 2012, Ziotis Incorporation, a subsidiary of Pfizer, filed to issue a potential initial public offering, an IPO of Class A common stock, which the sale represented ownership stake of up to 20%. And the debt is approximately 30% of the total invested capital, which goes along with the impact of leverage.
We pronounced that one Zoetis.
Zoetis.
Yeah, and it's still a very successful veterinarian drug producer.
For the debt and leverage, borrowing to implement acquisitions. So in 2009, Pfizer borrowed $22.5 billion from the bank for the Wyeth acquisition. Pfizer financed the remainder through a combination of cash and stock, so that contributed to the debt. In 2014, Pfizer acquired Baxter's portfolio of marketed vaccines at a cost of $635 million, which required some added debt as well. In 2014, they acquired a portion of the vaccine manufacturing facility in Orth, Austria as part of the deal. In 2015, Pfizer acquired Hospira for $17 billion, which was a lot more debt. And the comfortable range of leverage is not too high and not too low for Pfizer, which is good.
And that was at 31%, I think, right?
Yep.
Which is just about right, just like the 3 bears. Not too hot, not too cold, but just about right.
Here we have the critical success factor report card for Pfizer. The team considers their critical success factors as quality of science and technology, leverage, marketing, product innovation, manufacturing resources. Pfizer received a 4.6 average overall, which was the highest of the competitors that are listed, with Novartis, of course, coming in second, and GlaxoSmithKline coming in last at 3.2. Okay, the critical success factors are functional capabilities that separate winners from losers, and Pfizer's strong capabilities make them a winner not only in the United States, but globally. Quality of science includes the number of skills of scientists, breadth of research capabilities, and laboratory technology. In 2018, Pfizer had 92,400 employees worldwide. So this consisted of the scientists that ran the laboratories, who were in charge of their product categories, such as the Senior VP of Oncology. Their skills are tremendous. They're authors of publications. They sit on the boards and the grant review panel of the National Institute of Health. Their leverage, of course, we've talked about their leverage. They have long-term debt as a percent of invested capital. They do use that debt instead of the capital, and their preferred ratio is 25 to 35%. In marketing, they're focused on positive, large growing markets where there are strong customer needs and products that are important to their customers. They do have field sales personnel, and of course they also have strong relationships with the major hospitals. For product innovation, they have a number of products in the pipeline, of course, that we have discussed, the 11 that are in registration right now. And they have alliances and joint ventures, which we'd mentioned about the GlaxoSmithKline with the consumer products, and the one with Eli Whitney regarding the product for osteoarthritis. Their resources, financial, physical, and their patents. They have recently restructured, and by restructuring the organization, Pfizer can use needed resources to focus on the research and development to maintain a full pipeline of products that will meet their vision. They also did the spinoff of Zoetis and the proposed joint venture with Glaxo.
When we're speaking here about critical success factors, we do so in two different ways. When we're talking about the industry analysis, then we want to know what kind of functional capabilities distinguish winners from losers. So now that we're looking at Pfizer's capabilities, we want to see how well Pfizer stacks up against its rivals in terms of those functional capabilities.
So Pfizer scores high in all categories with ratings of either 4 or 5. Their scores for product innovation and manufacturing are higher than all of its competitors' scores in those two categories, providing it with potential competitive advantages of both differentiation and low cost. GlaxoSmithKline scores lowest due to the high financial risk as a result of its high leverage, and all of these major rivals' talents in science and technology are highly rated. Each is capable of developing blockbuster drugs.
Right.
And so,
who's doing that one?
Me. So we'll now move to the product lines that are the scope and development right now. As mentioned earlier throughout this presentation, we mentioned that several products are in the pipeline under development right now, with 11 coming out soon. Some of the rare diseases that are in process right now are hemophilia, which is sickle cell, Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, amyloid cardiomyopathy, amyloid polyneuropathy, chronic inflammatory demyelination, glomerulosclerosis, intracerebral hemorrhage, and adult growth hormone deficiency as well.
You really pronounced those well.
Thank you. Some of the vaccines that are also in stage 3 right now are for primary C. diff, respiratory syncytial virus, meningococcal, pneumococcal, group B strep, prostate cancer, and multiple other cancer prevention vaccines as well. Some of the therapeutic treatments that are out right now is aztreonam avibactam is in trial to treat complicated intra-abdominal infections, hospital-acquired pneumonia, and ventilator-assisted pneumonia or associated pneumonia. Those are important because they'll be working with hospitals, because a lot of the Medicare payments and reimbursements to the facilities will start to be decreased with increased instances of this hospital-acquired pneumonia and vent-associated pneumonias as well. They're also in trial with Bavencio right now to treat first-line and platinum-resistant refractory ovarian cancers, as well as second-line non-small cell lung cancers.
As we have seen the effects of Lipitor patent being expired on Pfizer, we will notice that some of Pfizer's most well-known drugs, patents have either lapsed or will lapse in the next 5 years. What it means that Pfizer is facing a serious problem which may affect its overall sales. If we notice on the chart, particularly in 2020, we'll see that 3 of their major drugs will be coming off patent, which will create more threats of substitutes into the market. And so the conclusion is Pfizer must maintain a pipeline that's full, even though rising costs of that pipeline may exist. And what they are doing to defer some of that cost is to outsource some of their research of those products, the newer products, to laboratories.
Good point.
And so, as you may have heard in the news recently, Pfizer did restructure at the beginning of this year, and they consolidated down to begin focusing their product lines into the groups of innovative medicines, which is their prescription medications, the consumer health care for over-the-counter medications, and established medicines that are also prescription medications. The prescription medication has Pfizer as a dominating country in this rapidly growing, or dominating company rather, in this rapidly growing market. For the consumer health care, the global brands that span the health and wellness market has provided Pfizer with the ability to continue to grow within it. The growth potential due to the aging population and the new wave of product releases is expected to boost Pfizer's growth in the innovative medicines category as well. This is a list of Pfizer's executive leadership team. I won't read them all, but we've highlighted the few that will really drive the company in the markets that they need to be and keep the focus where Pfizer can experience the highest profits and growth potential as well. So the first one is Albert Bourla, who is the Chief Executive Officer. Frank Emilio is the Chief Financial Officer and Executive VP of their Global Supply and Business Operations. Michael Dolston is the Global President of Worldwide Research and Development and is the medical side as well. Rady Johnson is the Executive VP and Chief Compliance, Quality and Risk Officer. So he plays a vital role to the safety of these medications that Pfizer is rolling out as well. Rod McKenzie is Executive VP and the Chief Development Officer. So he is responsible for how these medications are distributed and gets them out globally as well. And what's interesting as well on that on their leadership team is the span of both female and male representation, which you don't see in many companies today.
Good point.
And so Pfizer's matrix organization, they have their central headquarters with their corporate headquarters as well. They have global research and development, global pharmaceuticals, and global manufacturing, and they have separate regions for each of those across the globe as well. Their organization structure, their corporate and their corporate finance departments are centralized, whereas they also have a worldwide research and development, their global supply, and all the enabling functions for the behind-the-scenes work that Pfizer does. Their product line organization is again split between the innovative medicines, consumer health, and established medicines. The innovative medicines contains all the current innovative health business, their biosimilars, as well as their hospital medicines, which are the anti-infectives and sterile injectables. The consumer healthcare department is all of their over-the-counter brands, which, as we mentioned before, the merger with Glaxo has spun this group off as a new company altogether. Their established medicine department contains their legacy established products, which are the off-patent solid oral dose medications, as well as their peri-LOE products and contract manufacturing.
What a diagram. I think when I was working with this team, I complimented Michelle. This is a great visual to explain as straightforwardly as possible a very complicated structure based upon products. But what a complex structure the Pfizer has, because it's involved in so many categories of products. And we see one indication of what may be a trend for the future with one of its categories, the over-the-counter products, being headed out of the corporation into a joint venture with Glaxo. Maybe that's an indication of more things to come. Such a complex corporation, so many products, so much research and development. The overhead cost to keep all this going just must be astronomical. Every time I do that, the PowerPoint punishes me by keeping me from advancing the slide.
So this slide is the list of Pfizer's research and development locations. We have 7 in the United States and 2 in the UK. I will spare you all the details on this slide, but the biggest takeaways here, again, are their focus in oncology and vaccines. That's where it seems to be that Pfizer is moving long term.
Pfizer has many strengths but few weaknesses. Some of the strengths of Pfizer is the lower size of the company gives Pfizer more capabilities than many other companies. The patents that they do hold, although many of those patents are now becoming a weakness, the acquisition of Innopharma, which led to them having a expanded range of generic and injectable drugs that expanded their capabilities in that area. The comfort leverage ratio, which we have discussed before, gives them a strong financial ability and be strategically aggressive by removing the financial limitations. They are very strong globally, not just in the United States, which gives them a strong market position. They have many diversified products and services in medicine in several different therapeutic areas. And the acquisition of YF gave them a large over-the-counter product area, although that's getting ready to be going out with the acquisition with Glaxo. The weaknesses, again, the patents that are about to expire, and 2 key examples of that, they're going to lose the exclusivity of Leriris. I can't pronounce everything tonight. In June of 2019. So upcoming, that's their second best-selling drug, which is going to cause a lot of threats of substitution for that drug. And another example is Lipitor, as you already have heard before, by losing patent, the financial cost that it cost them.
Yeah. So who's
Okay,
doing?
now sorry.
Okay, goals?
Yep, now we're going to the goals section. And first, we're going to take a look at Pfizer's financial trend projections. These graphs show the sales, operating profit margin, return on investment, and return on equity for Pfizer. This shows the 2008 to 2018 financial results that we previously mentioned. with an addition to a forecast, which consists of 2019 to 2022. And the forecast is based on their 2008 to 2018 trends, which we will further discuss in a couple more slides. And then these graphs show the same, but now we're looking at Pfizer's long-term debt in millions, equity, invested capital, and leverage ratio for Pfizer, with the actual from 2008 to 2018 financial results with the forecast as well. We will discuss those results in upcoming slides. So this table represents Pfizer's financial table. It shows the data points for the years 2018, 2019, and 2022 on the graphs. So this data is coming from the graphs previously shown. The operating profit margin is extremely aggressive at 52%. The equity needs to be higher to reflect success, and the leverage should not get any lower. Below 26% is not making good use of capital.
Thank you for saying that.
So here we have a conclusion where Pfizer has a comfortable leverage, which means it is borrowing the right amount of money and easily paying it back. So a good balance of debt and equity. Return on investment is 3 times the interest rate. So if we borrow at 5%, we're earning 15% back. So Pfizer's paying back, the bank gets 5% and keeping the other 10%. So good use of that. Pfizer is the biggest pharmaceutical company for revenue and operating profit margin, which means that operations are strong in comparison to industry peers. They have a lot of long-term debt. However, it is doing a good job paying it off. Again, as mentioned above, good balance of debt and equity as they're paying it off. Pfizer has a high level of invested capital, which means that shareholders and debt holders both are investing a lot of capital in the company. Due to these financial summaries, Pfizer's 5-year financial goals are achievable. As we saw earlier in the financial results, they are profitable and they're the largest within the industry. So compared to its competitors, they are successful. It has achieved economies of scale while having competitive advantages from distinctive competencies. So here we have goals hierarchy. So we have the long-term growth. So this is focusing on unmet needs, the cardiovascular diseases, the oncology, Alzheimer's, rare diseases, vaccinations, and other drugs are part of the long-term growth. Product development track records, so Viagra, Lipitor, etc. Emerging markets and demographic expansion of markets are all in that category. So the favorable market position, we have established products. We have 155 approved drugs from Pfizer, and then there are 48 U.S. patented drugs. So the patented products also fall in this category, and then 1,275 international patents. Research and developmental opportunities also are a favorable market position for Pfizer. In the superior financial results, we have 30% average leverage, superior sales and profits, so 50% operating profit margin, 14% return on investment, and 19% return on equity. Number one compared to its competitors, highest sales, operating profit margin, and invested capital is shown in the graphs. Acceptable risk, large portfolios of patented and established products, and low leverage. So the debt is approximately 30% of total invested capital.
Yeah, a quick little theoretical insert here. Heather neglected to mention that the reason we have a goals hierarchy is to identify where the priorities should be placed on goal setting. And we do that by looking at 4 different dimensions. The first is acceptable risk. If you don't have acceptable risk, that's it. That's where you focus your goals, because anything above that, such as getting superior financial results or a more favorable market position, is desirable. But what's essential is that you get your risk to a point where you're not concerned about existential threats. You're not concerned about survival. So if leverage is really high, if your product lines are threatened with obsolescence, then your acceptable risk, your level of risk is not acceptable, and that's where you have to focus your goals. Once that's taken care of, you can move to the next highest level, which is to achieve superior financial results. Now, Pfizer's level of risk is clearly acceptable. They're not in jeopardy of being forced out of business. And we've seen that their financial results are pretty good too. So the bottom line in both of those levels is we're okay. We can move to the next highest level. And then we get into favorable market position. And in some of Pfizer's product categories, we're jockeying for market shares. In some cases, we've got strong market shares, but in others, not so strong. And so there's a fair amount of effort and prioritization going on to put the company in a more favorable position insofar as its market shares are concerned. There are some areas where we've got such a favorable market position that we can actually think, where do we go from here? And in the pharmaceutical industry, you know, that's a concern for all of the major players, because there are so many new developments occurring in science, biological science, that the major players have to put some priority there too. So if we reworded this diagram, we could actually say that our risk is acceptable, our financial results are superior, and therefore we're going to focus on gaining a more favorable market position and placing a priority also on long-term growth, which could be diversification or simply developing entirely new kinds of drugs. One of the things that people often forget at this point of the analysis is that the goals hierarchy is a prioritization mechanism. It's not an absolute priority mechanism. So the mere fact that we're focusing on favorable market position, getting into a more favorable market position in some of our drugs and looking further down the road in others, doesn't mean that we forget entirely about financial results or risk, okay? This is a prioritization device. So yes, and when we're setting goals, probably our most important priorities are market positioning, and then second most probably long-term growth. But that doesn't mean that we simply forget about financial results or even risk. It's just that when we're deciding where we're going to put most of our effort, where we're going to do most of our strategizing, it's probably going to be at that favorable market position and marketing, if you will, as well as developing drugs for the future. Sorry for that lengthy diatribe, but for those in the class, I think this is probably a pretty important teaching moment.
Now we're going to look at the non-financial goals. So the expansion of oncology drug market share is a goal for them. Cancer drug market is accelerating. The oncology business contributes to more than 10% to Pfizer's top line and will increase in coming years. It is expected to. New products and categories most needed by aging populations. So the cardiovascular, diabetes, Alzheimer's continue to be a key player in cardiovascular drugs compared to competitors. Pfizer has been on a strong run, and this trend is expected to increase its market share. Exploit biosimilars, consumer neuroscience, and legacy pharma drugs market share contributes to 35% of the company's revenue. Exploit of anti-infective drug market share. In 2015, it was reported that the firm had 75.84% share of the infectious and respiratory diseases market segment. Exploit of vaccination drug market share. In 2016, it was reported that the firm had 76.11% share of the consumer healthcare and vaccines market segment. As well as continued growth in treatments for rare diseases and continued growth in developing nations and regions. The distribution of off-patent and established products is in that category, and distribution of vaccines to developing nations and regions in Africa and South America specifically.
What we've seen here is that Heather has pointed out the prioritization of more favorable market positions in both of these slides.
And so now we'll move to the strategy section. So we talked about our vision, which is what is our purpose, our mission, what's our goal. So now we'll talk about strategy and how we'll achieve that goal. And then we'll talk about execution to make that goal happen, or that strategy happen. So as part of the strategic analysis.
Oh, I'm sorry. Should I not have flipped it yet?
Not yet.
Sorry.
That's okay. We'll discuss the industry analysis, which we've done, the competitor market analysis, which we've done, the internal capabilities and weaknesses, as well as the consumer market. Okay. So the generic strategic objectives tells us the source of the competitive advantage as well as the scope. And Pfizer's strategic objective falls in the focus differentiation category based on their quality, features, and values and the niche market segment that they fall in. Their innovation of new products within the current market is the focus of oncology, cardiology, and genetics to meet the needs of the patients in those markets. The market share to be gained through brand recognition and reputation, and their premium prices could be charged for the orphan drug categories. The international strategy is a global standardization. This is because they have laboratories worldwide and each contributes to the corporate level goals. The production practices are standardized across all facilities, and marketing practices for each location promote the local relationships with the governmental agencies and the healthcare providers in those areas, which is very important. Ansoff's growth matrix in the market penetration, which is the existing market and existing products, we have over-the-counter medications, branded generics, and chemicals. In the existing market and new products is our product development section where we have orphan drugs, oncology, and arthritis. In the new market segment with existing products is a market development, and that's in our underdeveloped countries such as Africa and our developed countries such as China. The product proliferation is for the new market segment and the new products. Some of these which have been divested are the animal sciences, which was Zoetis in 2013. The nutritional division was divested in 2012. Allergan's merger was halted by the U.S. government in 2013 due to concerns on antitrust.
Right. Sorry, the slide's not advancing. Sorry about that.
No worries.
There we go.
And some of the structural strategy that Pfizer has followed has been the acquisitions in 2000 of Warner Lambeth, which made it the second largest pharmacy company in the world. 2002, they acquired Pharmacia, which brought with them the product of Celebrex. In 2009, they acquired Wyeth, which now made them the largest farm company in the world. In 2010, as Heather had mentioned previously, they acquired King Pharmaceuticals to increase their products line. In 2015, they acquired Hospira, which came with the injectable pharmaceuticals. And in 2019, as we've mentioned, was the divestment of the over-the-counter medication as part of the GlaxoSmithKline merger. And for the capabilities development, to maintain their competitive advantage, they must continue to develop these capabilities in scientific research. So the scientists continue to develop the new treatment pathways and medicinal compounds, which makes Pfizer's products stand out and be more effective. Their cutting-edge technology provides new ways to deliver the medications at a lower price. Their continued research and development in the fields of oncology, vaccines, cardiology, and the orphan drugs where there's little to no competition in the market currently. And then expand into the underdeveloped companies as well, or countries as well. So their strategy for growth is anticipating in 2019 and beyond in the innovative and established medicines. They're going to, again, focus more on their core business. And they have already started this process, again, by their divestments of Zoetis, the nutritional sector, and Wyeth through their over-the-counter products. They also have vigorous research and development to move products along the pipeline, and they're currently expected to deliver 20-plus products in the next few years. And these upcoming years are projected to be the most productive in history. As Glenn had mentioned previously, we have 11 products in the registration phase currently and 26 in phase 3. They can gain innovation through leveraging their technology to reduce the timeline for new medication releases, and also, again, working with the local governmental agencies to advance the research agenda.
I'd just like to compliment you on that slide. Excellent summary of Pfizer's growth trajectory. You know, in strategy, what we try to do is paint a picture of direction. You know, what direction is the firm headed, and this does a very nice job of it.
Thank you.
Implementation. Somebody.
I'm ready.
Oh, well, talk to us. You want the slide? Okay.
Albert Brewer, who is the new CEO of Pfizer, he was previously the chief operating officer, which was part of the plan of succession, which I'll talk about a little bit later. He also had 25 years of experience with Pfizer, which gave him great experience and knowledge of the company. All right, the CEO succession plan, as I previously had mentioned, in September of 2018, when the board elected Dr. Brewer as the CEO and Mr. Reed transitioned to executive chairman, effective at the beginning of this year on January the 1st of 2019, this was part of a multi-year succession plan, which came into place when Dr. Brewer became the chief operating officer and joined the board in the early part of 2018. This was all part of a plan that was put into place that he would succeed Mr. Reed. R&D projects and programs.
Someone is moving some stuff around and your microphone is open. Consequently, we can hear that. If your microphone is open and you're not on this team, would you kindly close your microphone? Okay, Glenn, go ahead.
All right. Strategic research, collaborations, and license agreements with Caneta to develop new cancer immunotherapies. Immunotherapies. Pfizer was to give $15 million upfront and $500 million in research development and sales milestone payments, which was focused on small molecules that would target RIG pathway. And Pfizer is going to add 100 new jobs to oncology, as I had mentioned before about cancer. It is La Jolla?
Yeah.
All right. California site as they relocate the cancer immunology discovery unit from San Francisco. And this move would make the La Jolla campus one of the largest pharmaceutical research centers in the San Diego area. As oncology has become a focus of Pfizer, going back to something we had said previously, 44 of the current products that are in the pipeline are in the area of oncology.
Dynamite slide, Glenn.
Just like in our society, science is becoming a very important part, and it's done often through collaborations. And Pfizer has used several partnerships that has helped them to be able to deliver on this idea. The chart that is above shows us how society will play a role in innovative science products for Pfizer. Now, to the left, we will see 3 collaborations in which Pfizer has used in recent years, and what they like to refer to as the ecosystem of healthcare. So what they have is the Cyber Priorities Foundation and therapeutics. All these really deal with therapeutics. And the first one was dealt with in 2012 was a partnership which expanded research and collaboration to help speed the discovery of potential therapies for cystic fibrosis. The Center for Therapeutic Innovation was done to help scientific discovery and transition into new therapies. The National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, as Pfizer is a pioneer of that, the NCA which was a new division that helped match the researchers, academic researchers, with several pharmaceutical industries who own molecules.
Really good.
The Pfizer Foundation funds several different global health grants and investment programs that will address the challenges of improving healthcare delivery around the world in low and middle income countries. The three areas of focus that Pfizer addressed is the improved healthcare delivery by supporting organizations that will seek to develop innovative and sustainable approaches to healthcare products and services, to address the barriers that prevent women and children from the world from receiving sufficient health care, in increasing knowledge and awareness of non-communicable diseases that will help with the prevention, through prevention and early diagnosis. As we had mentioned very early in our presentation about Pfizer and China and the role that China plays with Pfizer, Pfizer is investing $350 million to build a biotech center in China. And Pfizer's goal is to increase ways to tap the China healthcare market. And what they're hoping it will help secure faster approvals for their products in the Asian market. The center will focus mostly on biologic drugs, which are made from living microorganisms, and with China having a $1.3 trillion spending projection for 2020, this was a very good idea for Pfizer to pursue. This is another example of the product pipeline. At the top, which is the most current one that's been available, we'll see the Pfizer snapshot as of January 2019 with the 100 products that are now in the line. You will see the 26 that are in phase 3, the 11 which are in registration stage. And it is important that these products are successful. But you would notice something at the bottom of the arrow, where arrows down from the top, where it said 4 projects was discontinued since the last update. So that's something that Pfizer wants to avoid if possible, because you will spend time and resources into each individual project, and failure is something that Pfizer doesn't want to see.
But it's part of the game.
Yes.
You know, everything that starts out in phase 1 isn't going to make it to phase 3 in registration.
That's
and
right.
When we consider that there are 100 of these things in the current pipeline, and only 4% of them have fallen out, that's not a bad drain rain.
No, it's a very good ratio.
Yeah. So nevertheless, as you say, every time we lose one, that means we got to go find 4 others, right?
Yes.
That's what's going over there in the discovery, all the way over to the left, and that's work that's done with universities, science and research laboratories to develop altogether new molecules that can then be eventually processed into a potential drug.
And so for the summary for the research and development programs, Pfizer anticipates spending between 7.8 and 8.3 billion on R&D in 2019 alone. They again anticipate releasing 25 to 30 new products by 2022, which are critical to the offset of the loss of current patents on several drugs in the same time frame. They also plan to invest $5 billion in capital projects in the U.S. to strengthen the manufacturing presence, which includes a $465 million facility in Portage, Michigan, that will be one of the most technologically advanced sterile injectable pharmaceutical production facilities in the world.
These are some of the very important acquisitions of Pfizer over the years. Just to highlight a few, of course, we've repeated several times by the acquisition of Warner Lambert, which made them the second largest pharmaceutical company in the world. The acquisition of Pharma,
Pharmacia.
which again was a part of their desire to acquire the rights for Celebrex, which is also one of their major drugs at the moment. In 2009, the acquisition of Wyeth, which made them the largest pharmaceutical company in the world. At the bottom, we would notice that when they spin out Zoetis, that was also a major acquisition for Pfizer, with a sale for Pfizer.
First they acquired it, and then they got rid of it.
The acquisition of Innopharma, which made Pfizer get my words mixed up. Pfizer expand its technical capabilities for producing generic and injectable drugs, and the acquisition of Hesperia, which also gave the company a more expanded ability.
As we mentioned before, the Pfizer and GlaxoSmithKline joint venture, it was announced December 29, 2018. This was at the Pfizer Consumer Health.
Glenn, are you moving something around that's crossing your microphone? Be careful, because when you push something, rub something up against your microphone, it sounds like a thunderstorm out here in our speakers. Pardon me for interrupting.
That's okay. Okay, so the Pfizer consumer health products consist of the pain relief, respiratory, vitamin, and mineral supplements. They will receive a 32% equity stake in the joint venture. They receive pro rata share of the joint venture earnings and dividends quarterly. They have the right to appoint 3 out of the 9 members of the board, and are expected to deliver $650 million in peak cost synergies. And cost synergies are savings in operating costs expected after the joint venture closes. They will own less than 50% of the company, and once the deal closes, they will be deconsolidating Pfizer Consumer Healthcare from its financial statements, and it is not expected to have an impact on Pfizer's top-line growth. It is expected to have a slight positive impact on Pfizer's operating margin over the next several years. Of course, we've talked about the new structure that Pfizer has started this year in 2019, and that includes the innovative medicine, which will include all the businesses currently included in innovative health segment, the biosimilars, and the new hospital business unit, including anti-infective and sterile injectables, established medicines, which will include legacy established products, peri-LOE products, and contract manufacturing, and of course consumer healthcare, which will be, if everything closes correctly, which will be a joint venture with Glaxo. And their major focus at that point will be on oncology, vaccines, rare diseases, immunology, and inflammatory diseases. Their partnership programs, I found this very interesting, that they have several partnership programs, and their purpose is health for all. So the Pfizer Foundation Healthy Families, Family Futures program, it supports more than 121,000 women in 5 African countries to integrate the delivery of childhood immunizations and family planning services, break down the barriers to access, and increase efficiencies to maximize impact. The International Trachoma Initiative, they donated more than 800 million doses of antibiotics to 40 countries to fight trachoma, which is a debilitating disease that causes blindness worldwide. And of course, Pfizer Pathways, this helped more than 679,000 patients receive over 9 million Pfizer prescriptions for free or reduced costs in the last 5 years. So they have others, Accelerate 2030, Global Health Fellows, and Global Health Teams. So they're very interesting partnerships that they have.
Who's doing this one?
Me. Again, this is the previous slide that we discussed, but we want to discuss the leadership in the new structure of innovative medicines, established medicine, and consumer healthcare, which is on the next slide. All right, the new organizational leadership structure. We have Mr. John Young, who would be responsible for the internal medicine and oncology and the biosimilars and the rare disease business units, he will also oversee the innovative medicines. Currently, he is a group president and a chief business officer for Pfizer. Then we have Miss, oh my goodness, is that
Angela Huang.
Wang will be responsible for
Consumer healthcare?
We'll be responsible for consumer healthcare. I'm trying to say another word that I had written down in front of it. For the consumer healthcare area. And then we have Mr. Gutler, if I'm saying his name correct, who has just become a member of the executive leadership team. And he came to the company as part of the Wyeth acquisition, will be responsible for the established medicine.
Okay. So somebody's going to give us the bottom line here.
The importance of making sure, conclusion and outlook for Pfizer. The importance of making sure that each project in its pipeline is a success for the company. Pfizer has been able to keep and stay ahead of the competition as many lowest profit drugs have gone off patent. Pfizer is doing a good job focusing on drugs and treating current medical issues, example, oncology and which is cancer. Pfizer faces more challenges now than in the past, but the company is in well position for the future.
That's it, right? How about that? What I want to do is just get this toolbar ready so that very quickly I can turn off the recorder. And I think I'll do that pretty quickly. But before I do, let me just compliment this team. This team was brave enough to go first of all the teams to present, largely because of Glenn. But aside from that, I think they kind of set the bar for the other teams, because this really was a good job. Covered a lot of ground in an hour and 45 minutes, which is very impressive to get it done, to get that much done in that period of time. You took us through the weeds a little bit at the very end. Boy, I mean, we got a whole lot of implementation here. But that implementation and the detail that you gave us made the strategy and the objectives believable. And so, you know, even where you took us through the weeds, the result was to add credibility to your presentation. So I just want to compliment you, and for everybody else who might see this presentation in our class or anywhere in cyberspace, folks, you've seen what a good team looks like when they do a good job. And so with that, I'm going to turn off the recording, and then I'm going to invite the members of the class who may still be in attendance to ask questions and do what they want. But first, let me turn off the recorder, because the longer this goes, the harder it is to convert to a YouTube. So